What is up, guys? The Coach's Corner is back. Myself, my guy, Coach Fred, we're back to recap a few games from the Week 9 slate and also preview some huge Week 10 matchups. Ben, but Coach, how you been doing?
Oh man, it's been better, but I'm fighting, man. We gonna keep moving. I'm doing all right. How about yourself?
Hey, not too bad, not too bad. Excited for football this weekend. Still sad. Each week goes by, I get a little bit more sad because I know the end's coming, and it feels like just yesterday it was August 29th and the season was kicking off. This season has been the fastest season I think I've ever experienced in my life.
Oh, most definitely. Like you said, it was just last week we were standing there in the rain, wondering if we were gonna get to play Stephen F. Austin, and here we are looking at Thanksgiving, basically. Just that quick is how it feels.
Oh man, and then we get to the off season. It's just a whole bunch of speculation for 6, 7 months out of the year. We get a little break with the draft, but it's going to be a long off season. I know the year's going to stop moving very fast when we get there. But coach, quickly, that last week's episode we had some issues, but both of us nailed this game. I think we both said Ohio State by double digits. Exactly what happened. 28 fourth quarter points for the Buckeyes after struggling a little bit early to move the ball consistently. Were you surprised that it took the Buckeyes to the fourth quarter to really pull away in this one?
I'd like to say yes, but no. Yes, because it was a day game, 11 a.m. It wasn't a night game in Happy Valley. But no, because Penn State was going to bring their A game. They essentially needed this game, I think, to stay into the college football playoff picture, not just conference. So I expected them to come out and just throw their best, and that's what they did.
They did. CJ Stroud, Heisman level performance, 26 to 33, 354, a touchdown. But I got to give Penn State a little bit of credit. They slowed down the rushing attack. They held Travion Henderson to under 80 yards rushing. He did have two big touchdowns, but the big stat though for Sean Clifford, listen, he proved me wrong. He went out here, he threw it from almost 400 yards. He did it against a really talented secondary for Ohio State, but turnovers at the end of the day will cost you in a big way. Three picks. They had four team turnovers. You cannot have that if you plan on beating the number two team in the country, especially in late October.
You can't have that if you're planning on beating the bottom team in your conference. That's just tough to overcome. And we talked about it in the past. Some turnovers you can live with, but when you start getting past the one turnover, the two turnover, now you're getting, you're lessening your chance to win. But there was one thing that stood out, and I think we talked about it, was Ohio State's ability to pass the ball, and could Penn State stop those receivers? And Marvin Harrison Jr. went off, man, 10 for 185. That was impressive. That was impressive.
He's a stud too. He's still young. I think if I'm not mistaken, he's a sophomore,
Yeah.
true sophomore. Man, he has all the time. I know that it's hard when your dad is Marvin Harris. I get it, but man, the kid's got Sunday talent. In my opinion, I think he's going to follow right in his father's footsteps, and he's making a name for himself, and especially in a loaded wide receiving room where any given weekend you could have four or five different guys be that guy. Marvin Harrison Jr. continues to establish himself as wide receiver one, in my opinion, for the Buckeyes.
And does it quietly. Does it quietly. Goes about his business kind of like his dad. And you think it's just a subpar day, and then you look and it's like, wow, yeah, 10 catches for 185 yards. He just does it quietly.
And this was a big one, before we move on, for Ohio State to show that even though their offense struggled early, their defense was able to play well enough to keep them in the game. Because if Penn State got off to a quick start, that could have got really ugly. So, man, big win for Ohio State. Number 2 in the initial college football playoff rankings that came out on Tuesday night. Penn State drops another game. Still have some big games on the schedule. We'll see what they move on from there, but man, this game, we don't even have to spend a lot of time on it. We both picked Tennessee last week. I didn't think both of us said Tennessee in a blowout. Well,
Yeah.
coach, 44-6. And the 6 came early in the first quarter for Kentucky, and Tennessee went on an absolute tear throughout the rest of the game. Anything surprise you in this one, coach, or is this just the Vols being the Vols?
This is the Vols being the Vols, but the one thing that stood out that surprised me was Kentucky, 98 yards passing with 3 INTs, and that's supposed to be a first day guy coming off the NFL board. That one really stunned me. And then you're talking about, 422 yards to 205. We talk about how fast Tennessee goes, and that thing got away from Kentucky really fast.
Yeah, they had the blackout, the uniforms again looked so clean. The crowd was into it, but the criticism for Tennessee all year, and you can argue Kentucky's offense, how potent they really are, but when you hold a top 20 team to 2 for 13 on third down, less than 210 total yards, you hold them to under 100 yards passing, under 110 yards rushing. They average less than 3.5 yards per pass and catch and force 3 turnovers. I don't care what the offense looks like. This was a top 20 Kentucky team, ranked wins on the resume. This was a statement game for Tennessee's defense, and potentially, we're going to get into the game later, give some fans hope for that defense going into a crucial matchup against Georgia where they're going to have to get some stops.
And that's the thing. No one was talking about their defense. And, like we said earlier now, don't get it wrong. Kentucky can run the ball. And they cut that water off. And I think that's where the pressure came on the pass game, and they just couldn't do it. And you've been screaming about the front four of Tennessee since we kind of started on this deal, and they showed up. Constant pressure, got happy feet back there, and it showed in the stat line when you're talking about 98 yards and 3 INTs. That's not good. That's not going to cut it.
Huge win for Tennessee. They came into this game number 3. We shift to the college football playoff rankings. If they didn't need any more pressure, well, they got it. They jumped to number 1 in the country after this win before their matchup against Georgia. We'll get into that one in a minute. 2 FCS games. We got to recap, Coach. My opinion, a game of the year candidate this weekend between Fordham and Holy Cross goes to overtime. And, Coach, before we get into anything, you've been a play caller. You're on the offensive side of the football. The guts and the trust in your team to go for 2 in the first overtime and run a quote unquote Philly special to try to win the game. Man, that play call, that would you call that in that situation? And how much credit do you give the guys for executing that well? Because they didn't have to pass it. The wide receiver just ran it in instead of throwing it, and the quarterback was wide open.
There was multiple options there in that play. And I don't know if I've got that, and it's a family show, so I'm not going to say it, but I don't know if I got that to call. And, for them to call it and for the kids to execute it, man, I'm sure they were going absolutely nuts up in that press box if that's where the OC is. And, just that play alone sums up that game. It takes away a little bit from my man, but, Holy Cross put up 600 yards. Now they gave up quite a bit, but you're still talking about putting up 600 yards, man. That's a lot of offense.
And as crazy as this sounds, Coach, Fordham was held below their season average in yards, and they put up over 500.
Over 500.
That's crazy. They're on track to potentially, be in recent memory one of the most potent offense. They're still averaging over 600 yards per game as we talk today. That's unheard of. And Tim DeMoret throws for 5 touchdowns still, didn't have a turnover, but Matthew Solka was the guy that took this game over. 291 through the air, 4 passing touchdowns, also had 174 and a touchdown on the ground, averaged 8 yards per carry for Holy Cross. It just came down, Coach, to which team was going to make the play. And it just seemed like every time Fordham got a little bit of momentum, Holy Cross found a way to answer. And then in overtime, it always helps. That coin toss is so important. Going second puts the ball in your court, and they said, listen, they can't stop us on offense. We're going to roll the dice. And we're going to go win this game. And like you said, I don't know if I could have made that call. The guts that took is insane. But you also got to give a lot of credit to the players in a big moment where you could get distracted, make one wrong step. They executed a very difficult play to run perfectly.
I mean, just how you draw it up on the board. Like you said, he had the option to throw it. He just ran it. I mean, he probably could have kicked it. I mean, That the offensive line, man, if you go back and watch it, man, they completely moved that whole thing down that way, which was very impressive. And just like you said, just to have the nerve to, hey, Philly special. And I'm sure it went silent for a minute, like, are you sure? And then they signaled it in, and it actually, get that thing to get off. That's what college football is all about.
That's one of those calls. Hindsight's 2020, and it looks like a genius call. But if that doesn't work, man, people are calling for your job.
What down was that? Was it third
It,
down?
no, it was the 2-point conversion.
Oh,
It was win or go home.
that was win. Yeah, you're right. That was win or go home. You got to make this play. It's your ball. Yeah, I don't know if I make that call.
That's man at home. I mean, I know the crowd was dying, but in terms of receiving, man, Deuce Carter for Fordham, he was the third ranked wide receiver coming into the game. 4 touches for 3 touchdowns for Fordham through the air, and then Jalen Coker. And I mentioned him on the preview. He's just that guy, man. 6 catches for 3 touchdowns, 131. The Holy Cross defense, man, made some plays early, but man, Fordham just kept coming. You have to give Fordham some credit. I just think their offense is that prolific. I don't know if there's a defense in the country that wants to see them on their best day.
And it's like we talked about when we first started the show. If you've got that trigger man, you've got a chance. Any ball game you go into, you have a chance. And they've got the trigger man of all trigger mans. And he's going to give them a chance. And you can tell that team really, really believes in him. And they follow him.
A big win for Holy Cross probably sets them up for a seat in the playoffs. I don't see them losing down the stretch unless something dramatic happens. Fordham, I think, made a really good case. Their 2 losses are a 1-score loss to Ohio, a 1-point loss to Holy Cross on the road. I think they have enough to get to the playoffs if they win out. We'll see what happens with the Patriot League. We know the perception of the league. Go ahead.
Is that your vote? I mean, you want excitement, right?
I think so. I'm not on the committee, sadly. I just get to vote in the top 25. I kept Fordham my top 25, but I would put them in the playoffs.
If you're sitting on that committee.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I think so.
You want excitement. You want people to come see the players. I mean, they've got one of the best players in the country, any level. I mean, I think they get in. They should. Unless they just completely fall on their face these next 3 weeks. I mean, that's got to be a no-brainer.
Yeah, especially when you look at, when you look at the teams on the bubble, who are potentially going to be on the bubble, things can change in 3 weeks. They got the 2 probably most competitive losses out of all the teams on the bubble. For a 2-loss team, you looked at an FBS loss, which I don't think anyone faults an FCS school for losing to an FBS school. A 1-point loss to the number 5 team in the country on the road. Man, I mean, you look across the country, man, that's tough. That is a brutal that's a brutal schedule, but man, we'll see. I'm hoping Fordham gets in. I think they should, but you never know. Well, they could be a lock in 3 weeks.
Yep.
But the last game here, another team we'll talk about in just a minute, just because, man, for Sacramento State, I think they've played like 4 straight top 15 teams, it feels like now. But a big win this weekend against Idaho, one of the up and coming teams in the country, 31-28. Coach, your big takeaways this weekend?
I think I called this one, right?
Yeah, we both picked Sac State.
This one, and I called this one on the ground. This was going to be the game, and it's what did it. 300 yards rushing. They had 2 guys over 100, and I think at that point, Idaho, they fought, man. But like I said, that running game wears you down, and that clock continues to tick when you're running that ball, and it put a lot of pressure on Idaho. I think those last couple drives, from what I was able to see, and they went to pressing. When you can run the ball effectively the way they do it, quarterback wise and the running back, I mean, that just makes them dynamic. It's going to be a tough out.
Yeah, the biggest question mark moving forward for Sac State for me is just consistency at the quarterback spot, because Asher O'Hara can do what he does on the ground. He did throw a pass, but man, Jake Dunaway, 2 interceptions will cost you games down the stretch.
Oh, yeah.
If you're running the football effectively, just don't turn it over. If it's not there, get rid of it. Get down, get rid of it. Just, you can't give it away. Cameron Scatterbo is that guy. 134. I think he's averaging like 9 yards per carry this year still. It's just an insane pace. And on the defensive side, he won one of my player of the weeks this year. Armand Bailey, 9 tackles, 3 for loss, 3 sacks, and a forced fumble this weekend. all over the field. And when you get that production from one of your best defensive players, it's really hard not to come out with a win. I thought Sac State made a big statement, but I do want to say Giovanni McCoy, freshman of the year again, man, 3 touchdowns against a really talented Sac State defense, 207. Coach, I mean, with a freshman, when you know you got a freshman quarterback and he's hot, man, how do you keep him reeled in throughout the season when you're going through all these big games?
You just hope that you rely on his youth, that he doesn't know, that he doesn't realize what he's going into, and then that way he don't think about it. He just goes out and plays. He's been impressive. That's been your call. That's been your guy. I tipped my hat from the beginning, and he hadn't fell off. And that's the impressive part about it. He hadn't fell off. But to go back to Sac, I think you said it once before. The old saying, you play 2 quarterbacks, you don't have one. But they're playing 2. But I think once you get to this point in the season and you're continuing to get into the playoffs, I think one guy's reps got to go down. And then you don't want to fall off into that situation of where the old Nebraskas of old, where they can run it against anybody. But the minute you go down, you get up 2 scores on them, now they've got to throw the ball, and that's not really their thing. That's the only thing I worry about with Sac going forward. If they get down 2-score game, third quarter, who's going to play the QB spot?
It's got to be done away. Asher O'Hara is probably a run first guy, I would say. I don't see him tossing it. He threw it in the goal line this week. That's where he got his touchdown. He threw it close. But the problem they potentially could run into is when O'Hara's in there, you know what's coming. They're running the football, which almost makes it more impressive because they tip their hat at what they're running and you still can't stop them. Like they're just going to run it down your throat consistently. But also, one last shout out to the Idaho tight end, Hayden Hatton, 7 catches, 113, 3 touchdowns from the tight end spot. Another young guy for the Vandals. For Jason Ekman, first year head coach, freshman starting quarterback, young players everywhere. Idaho's had one hell of a year. Their only losses right now, coach, are to 2 Power 5 programs, one by 1 score in Washington State, which their quarterback's Cameron Ward, who was the Jerry Rice Award winner at the FCS 2 years ago. And then they lost to Sacramento State by 3 this weekend on the road. So big shout out to the Vandals. Hell of a game too, but Sac State gets the big win. But coach, this weekend, we know the game of the week. Everyone knows the game of the week, regardless of the level. It's Georgia hosting number 1 Tennessee. And coach, I mentioned it earlier. If you're on the Tennessee coaching staff, as cool as it is to be the number 1 team in the country, you're a little sick though to your stomach. That's like, man, we had all this pressure anyway, and now you're going to give Georgia the motivation of, hey, we took your number 1 spot. What, 72 hours before this game? So now, how do you like me?
Man, you want to talk about added pressure? You want to talk about adding some hot sauce to the gumbo? I mean, that's what they just did. UGA is probably not really happy about it. I'm sure it's a lot of stuff up in that locker room on that bulletin board about all that. So if I'm Tennessee, like you said, Tennessee's coaching staff, I'm just like, oh man, we could have settled for 4th. We didn't have to jump to 1. We could have settled to stay right there at 4. We could have stayed at 3. You didn't have to do this, that kind of thing.
It's tough, man. But coach, what the matchup, of course, I know we're both going to talk about it. Georgia's defense, one of the best in the country, against this Tennessee offense, averaging over almost 50 points per game, over 500 plus yards per game. Do you think Tennessee has enough firepower to withstand this Georgia defense on the road this weekend?
It's gonna be up front. Will UGA get Hooker out of his comfort zone? Like you said, they're averaging 49, almost, over 550 yards. But we know who makes that engine go. Are they going to be able to, UGA going to be able to move him off his spot? That's going to be huge, huge going into this game. One team averages 49, one averages 40, 41. I think that's where it is, up front. Most games are won, but this one's really won up front because skill for skill, I don't know if Georgia can keep Tennessee under wraps long enough to stay in the game if they don't get pressure on Hooker.
And of course, they are missing their 5-star defensive end, if I'm not mistaken, Carter, which is going to be a monster loss. They're already missing a few pieces in that front seven. The big question for me though is Tennessee's defense too. Because we know Tennessee, I'd be shocked if they hit their average. 49 points is a lot on the road in Athens against Kirby Smart, of just staff of Will Muschamp on it, a former two-time SEC head coach, defensive coordinator. But if you can get to 30 and find a way to put this game on Stetson Bennett, I like your chances a lot more. The number one thing for me is Tennessee allowing less than 100 yards per game on the ground, Georgia running for over 200. We know what that stable of backs with McIntosh, Edwards, and all of them can do. If Tennessee can make Georgia one-dimensional and make this game more about Hendon Hooker versus Stetson Bennett, Tennessee gets the immediate advantage in that battle.
And that's what it comes down to. Other than, like I said, up front, now it's the quarterback matchup, and can Stetson do enough to help his team if it's a tight game? I don't know if it's a tight game. That's the thing. If Georgia starts out fast with the pressure, I think it gives them the ability to play where they want to play. I know Georgia wants to play fast, but they don't want to play fast with Tennessee. That's a recipe for disaster, I think. And Tennessee's defense has shown up the last couple of weeks. Now they can't have that meltdown they had against Alabama, or it's going to be problems. But Benson, Stetson versus Hooker, and that D line versus that O line, that's going to be the matchup. Matchup A, B, however you want to slice it. That whichever one you want to pull, that's what this game's going to come down to.
Yeah, because if you're Georgia, you can run the football, you're feeling really good. Because one, as you know, coach, it keeps that offense on the sideline. The best way to stop a potent offense is to put them on the sideline on the bench with holding their helmets.
Yep.
But if you can't run the football, those quick 3-and-outs turn into a lot of opportunities for Tennessee. You're already missing some guys up front. That could cause a lot of problems. Because if you let Hooker sit in the pocket, he doesn't make bad decisions. One interception this year, coach. That's it. And he's completing 70+% of his passes. You have to force him into mistakes. And if you're Hooker, this is not the game to catch the INT bug.
No,
Protect the football.
no. And this is not the game to try to win the Heisman. Just stay within what you're doing, and let the chips fall where they may. I just worry about that now that you brought that up. I just worry about Tennessee, as I've said before. This is kind of newfound for them here. Worry about them pressing, and you press, that gets you into trouble. Will Georgia gets up 10? Will Hooker begin to press, or will he stay the course and just trust what's going on around him? Same thing with Stetson. If Tennessee goes up 10, now does he start to press and try to fit that thing in there a little tighter, and it gets away from him? So it's going to be interesting. 2 o'clock it's going to be an interesting game.
It's going to be huge. And, I've been to Athens a few times. I've been there for some big games. I was actually there when Tennessee upset Georgia with the Hail Mary back a few years ago. But that stadium is different, man. When they get the red lights going at night and that crowd is rocking, they fit 93 plus in there. It's a different environment than having Alabama at home. And all that attention, college game day in Knoxville is different. But coach, who do you like in this matchup? Who takes the commanding lead in the SEC East and probably is the consensus number one team in the country come Monday morning?
I'm making this, and I'm a little nervous. I'm going to stick with what I wrote down, with who I circled, and it's strictly because they are at home. I think Georgia wins this one. They're at home. The momentum, the place is going to be rocking. Tennessee O-line showed some chinks late in that game versus Alabama. Don't think that Kirby hadn't saw that, watched that, broke that down, turned it upside down, all that to get that, get those schemes fit into what, well, I shouldn't say fit in because it's the same system. So I'm going Georgia at home. And this is going to be, this was going to turn out to be a 10-point deal.
I like it. I like it. I've released my preview earlier. I'm gonna ride with Tennessee, man. I do agree. I won't be surprised if we come back here on, next week and you're like, listen, that defense was the X factor. Probably I said Kirby Smart's the best defensive mind in the game. It's just this Tennessee team reminds me so much of that 2019 LSU team where they just found that quarterback. They got a wide receiving core that is deeper than anyone else, and it's just like, are they just seem to have all the momentum in the world, and I just feel like they're gonna have a little bit more magic. I got Tennessee squeaking by 3 this weekend. Georgia an 8-point favorite this weekend, so I'm going with the upset, I guess, point spread wise, not rankings wise. And you got the Bulldogs defending their home, but guys, I mentioned last week, even though the episode didn't go, man, we brought to you by Prize Picks, man. Make sure to go download on on all your smartphones. Use the promo code Bluebloods to get a 100% deposit match up to $100. Coach, the 2 big lines this weekend that we're going to preview for everyone. All you guys got to do, pick 2 to 5 players, and against the Prize Picks player projections, pick whether the player will go higher or lower than that projection. So, Coach, Stetson Bennett, 300.5 passing yards this weekend for the Georgia Bulldogs. You think he's above that or below that this weekend?
He's below that.
I agree. I know that Tennessee secondary is bad, but man, 300 yards in a game like this is going to be steep.
Yeah, they're going to run the ball.
Yeah, and I mean, these could change, but also they got Hendon Hooker at 285 this weekend, Coach, through the air. Higher or lower than 285? That's a good one. That one could be debated, I feel like.
Because if they get in trouble, he's got to throw it.
Exactly.
If they get up, they're going to get up by him throwing it. I'm saying he's going to go over that.
I agree. I think I can see him right about 300. And I was really, I guess it must be the defenses. I was really surprised Bennett was that much higher than Hooker. Hooker's averaging like 350 a game through the air. Stetson, I think, is averaging about 200 through the air this year. So, man, they must not trust the Tennessee secondary over a Prize Picks. But listen, we got Stetson going lower than 300 plus passing yards. We got Hendon Hooker going over 285. Man, that's 2 free picks for you guys. Go download those Prize Picks on your smartphones now. Use the promo code Bluebloods to get a 100% deposit match. But Coach, I don't like to stay in conference for 2 games, but listen, when you got 2 top 10 matchups, you got to do what you got to do. Number 6 Alabama traveling to Coach, we covered the LSU Tennessee State game. If I would have told you 3-4 weeks ago that LSU would be top 10 in the country after what we discussed Tennessee did to them, you probably would have been like, I will bet you whatever you need for that. Number 10 LSU hosting number 6 Alabama, 6 p.m. kickoff. Death Valley is going to be different. I just take my word on that, guys. If you're listening to this, I've been there. Do not want to play there when the sun goes down. But Alabama's rolling in there, Coach. Anyway, the Tigers pull off the upset this weekend over the Crimson Tide. Alabama, by the way, is a 13.5-point favorite this weekend over the Tigers.
A lot of points on the road. But I don't think LSU, I don't think they win this game. But the way that they can win it is they have to be able to run the ball. And Alabama gives up 93 yards a game rushing. LSU runs for close to 200. Something's got to give. But a Nick Saban's defense, I just don't see them falling twice in a year. I got to be made a believer because it never happens. Knock, knock. But that's LSU's key. They've got to be able to run the ball.
I think the last time Alabama lost 2 games in the regular season, not due to injuries. I did lose that year. They lost Tua for the year. They lost more than 2 games. But when you lose your starting quarterback, I kind of give that a watch. And they lost to Auburn on a missed field goal in 2019. But I think it was like 2010. They had 3 losses that regular season. That was the year Cam Newton at Auburn beat them on the comeback. They got upset by South Carolina, that was when they had Steve Spurrier, Marcus Lattimore. Then they got upset by LSU that year with was it not Justin Jefferson? The other his older brother who played quarterback. I think it was Jordan Jefferson, if I'm not mistaken. LSU fans are going to come for me for that one, but it was a long time ago. I was not even in high school yet, 2010. So you got to give me a break there. But Jaden Daniels, Coach, is probably the X factor here for me. He's been electric. I didn't trust him very much to start the year. He started out the year, I would say, kind of iffy. He leads the team in rushing, 500 on the ground, 9 rushing touchdowns, still only 1 pick on the year, 12 passing touchdowns, almost 2,000 through the air. Jalen Daniels is going to have to play a Hendon Hooker type game for LSU to have any chance in this one.
And when I went back and looked at the stats, I was really surprised that he only has one INT. But I was like you after that Florida State game, watching them and catching them a few more times. I was just out when I saw they were ranked 10th. I had to go back and look again. I'm like, wait a minute, is that right? But since then, they've been playing ball, and he is the X factor in that run game. Now, how much do you run him versus an Alabama defense? It as I say, it's nothing but a dice game now. You run him, you run the risk of, or you don't run him, and you hope you can get your run game off by other measures. But either way it goes, I mean, you're rolling the dice. But he is their X factor. I'm with you on that one.
And with the Alabama offense, I feel I could be wrong, but I feel like this is one of the more balanced Nick Saban offenses that we've seen in his tenure. I know there's been some other ones but for me, they've never had a game changer like Bryce Young at quarterback and then a running back unit really that has so many playmakers. They're averaging over 200 on the ground and through the air. And Jameer Gibbs has been a superstar at the running back spot. 672 on the ground, 6 touchdowns. His addition has really opened up I feel like the play calling for Bill O'Brien and Alabama. I worry about LSU not being able to make Bama one dimensional. And if you allow Gibbs to get off and Bryce Young to work off of that and push the ball downfield, it could be a extremely long night for LSU's defense.
Right, and right now, coming off that injury, Bryce Young is cooking. And like you said, he's got the ability to play off of play action, which is really helping him, which is going to put extreme amount of pressure on LSU's defense to take one away. Now, which one do you take away, and which one are you willing to let quote unquote try and beat you? That's going to be key. It'll be interesting to see what LSU does. Or who they try to cancel out. That's going to be interesting.
You got to make a business decision. You probably can't take both of them away, but you got to choose. You got to kind of pick your poison there. But coach, 13.5 point favorite, Alabama, LSU this weekend. Who do you have?
I'm taking Bama in the over. I don't even know what the
Ooh,
over.
I like it. So Bama in a blowout. I got Bama too, man. I think I don't know if they cover the 13.5 point spread. Death Valley's weird like that, where when LSU's good and Death Valley's rocking, they compete in some games that they might not have necessarily competed in otherwise if it was played elsewhere. But I agree with you. I think Bama wins this one. I just think their offense is too much, and it's been a great season for LSU. Year one of Brian Kelly after how it started, and they've rebounded in a big way. That Ole Miss game was really the coming out party for me for Jaden Daniels at the quarterback spot. But man, I think Ole Miss might have been a little bit overrated in my opinion, and I don't think it's the same as beating Bama.
Nah, and that Ole Miss win's looking a little different right now. We'll see how it looks at the end of the year, but it doesn't have the same shine that it once had in the beginning. So I'm with you on that one. I just think Nick Saban knows how to win there, man. He ain't afraid. He's not. His team's not going to be afraid of that night game and possible earthquake happening and all that kind of stuff, man. I just think he's going to have those guys ready, and they know what's at stake. They've got to win if they want to stay in contention. They know what's at stake.
Yeah, you got to win now if you're getting the playoffs. Bama right now on the outside looking in, one of the first two out at number 6. But big win for Bama potentially this weekend. An even bigger upset for LSU, where you're looking at them at 2 losses, now having a playoff resume potentially because they would be in the driver's seat for the West with wins over Ole Miss and Alabama. Moving forward, their only losses to Tennessee in conference. They can meet Tennessee or Georgia in the SEC championship. It'd be a huge turnaround for Brian Kelly and that first year staff over at LSU. But coach, headed to the CAA, New Hampshire, Richmond, a top 20 CAA matchup. The CAA is in shambles right now in terms of the conference race. I think there's still like 6 or 7 teams that have a way to win this. Richmond though needs this one. Richmond and New Hampshire have just ridiculous schedules down the stretch. But Richmond, after this weekend, travel to Delaware, top 20 team in the country, and then host William and Mary the final week of the season. who is a top 10 team and right now my favorite to win the conference. So a loss here could set the Spiders back a long way in the race. New Hampshire, though, undefeated right now in conference. They're the leader in the CAA. The only losses are to Western Michigan FBS team and that upset loss to North Carolina Central in week 3 at home. Coach, what are you looking for in this matchup, and who do you like in this crucial, probably CAA elimination matchup for the conference?
I like Richmond, and it comes down to their quarterback. Um, I think if he can control the game, uh, they win this one. They're at home, but it comes down to him controlling the game, and he hadn't made a lot of mistakes, but not making the mistake and keeping his team on the field. I have it here. Richmond's quarterback. That's Richmond's quarterback. That's what it comes down to.
Reef Shudinski has played a uh, has had a spectacular season. I guess that's probably the best way to put it right now for him. Leeds actually, coach, could be on pace to challenge for the completion percentage FCS record, if I'm not mistaken, this weekend. If he continues his pace, 2,200 yards, 19 touchdowns, only 3 picks. I'm inclined to agree with you. I think the balance that Richmond has on offense is a little bit more. I trust Dykes at the running back spots to kind of match what New Hampshire has with Laub at the running back spot. I just trust Udinsky over Brosmer for New Hampshire. Brosmer's had a great season, 14 tubs, only 5 picks, 1,700 yards passing. But Udinsky's accuracy, his ability to take care of the football, and Richmond's ability to shut down the run in the front seven. Aaron Wheeler is an All American type linebacker, and Jacob Harris at Richmond at the wide receiver spot is one of the most consistent receiving threats week in and week out. I think the Spiders pull off the big home upset over New Hampshire, and and I think this a Richmond upset this weekend, coach, probably causes more chaos in the CAA than that we have seen in the entire country right now in terms of a conference championship race.
Everybody still has a chance. If that happens, then it just, like you said, it goes haywire. But right now, everybody still has a chance. But you know that you have to win. And those home wins come by easier than on the road wins. And I think that's, one of those things where Richmond has got to hone in on that. I think their next three, they're 1-2 on the road, home kind of thing. But Udinsky is the key, and I'm going with them, the home team.
I like it. And yeah, Richmond needs this win. If you go 0-3 to finish the season, you're probably missing the playoffs. That bubble is going to get real tight, and losing 3 in a row to end the season is going to put them firmly on probably the outside looking in. But game of the week, man, we just talked about 1 versus 3. We got a 2 versus 5 matchup this weekend. Two teams that, man, it just seems their schedules have been brutal. You look at Sac State, ranked games against Montana and Idaho the past 2 weeks, now have to go on the road to number 5. And when you look at Weber State, a road trip to number 3 in the country at the time, and then they play Montana, the same Montana Sac State just played, and now they got to play each other. So the schedule has been brutal for both of these teams down the stretch. But coach, who do you like in this huge Big Sky matchup this weekend between Sac State and Weber State?
Which team is going to make the other team bow down to their ball game? We know what Sac State wants to do, and we know what Weber State wants to do. Um, it's going to come down to, can Weber State's defense make Sac have to throw the football? If they can cut that off and cut that run off and make them have to throw the ball, they've got a chance. That's a tall order, but if they can get that done, they win it. And just to separate myself a little bit farther from you in the situation, I'm going to take the home team for the win.
I like that one. Yeah, the key. Oh man, the key for sure has to be stopping the run. And also, this is an interesting stat for you, Coach. Sac State has a 16 game Big Sky Conference winning streak right now. Their last loss was to Weber State in 2019. So just a little nugget there. The streak's on the line, and you're traveling to the same place where the streak
Got to
the
go.
streak was it was not there.
Yeah.
So, but man, Cameron Scadabo, 4 straight games of 100+ rushing yards. Asher O'Hara, we know what he can do. He has a touchdown in every game this season, coach, on the ground. And when you look at Weber State, you mentioned stopping the run. They did limit Montana last week to 114 yards on the ground and ranked second in the country in yards per play allowed at only 3.9 and seventh in just total yards per game allowed. So this defense is legit. The strength's in the back end of the defense. So if they can stop the run, force Dunaway to put the ball in the air, Maxwell Anderson, we've all heard his name on this show, is back there waiting. Eddie Heckard is back there waiting, and they have a lot of talented defensive backs. That's going to be the main key. And then also, Weber, we got to fix special teams. The long snapper cannot give 8 points away to Sac State like they did 2 weeks ago. We got to get that fixed. And they probably have a win over Montana State right now. If that doesn't happen, this team at home, coach, I know you've picked them for separation, but I'm riding with Weber too here. I've been on Weber's bandwagon. I've picked them 3 times on the show since we've had them. I've been trying to ride with them. They let me down 1 week. I still believe. I think Tom McPherson, matchup nightmare on the outside. I think that dual threat at running back led by Bankston, 500+ yards rushing is enough to get it done. If they can match the production on the ground for Sac State and their defense can force a turnover or two, I have a tough time believing Sac State can go into Utah and pull out this win this weekend against Weber State.
And if Weber State gets up, that turns the game and makes that Sac has to go. They have to go one-dimensional at that point. And if they don't, if Weber can just match point for point, I think at home, if you can get it to 24-24 into the fourth quarter, and go by the old arena rules, get 2 stops in the fourth, and you capitalize on those 2 stops, Sac's got to do something different. They're at home, and I like the at home, and I like the little nuggets you gave me, which I didn't know, but I like that, and I'm gonna stick with it. I wrote it down. I'm gonna stick with it.
Yeah, man. So, man, me and Coach got all the same picks this weekend. I think this is for the first time. No, all picks but one. He got Georgia. I got Tennessee. So that's going to be the deciding game this weekend. We both had good weeks last week. I think the only game we disagreed on though was Holy Cross Fordham. So I got up on you on that one. But man, Coach, appreciate you. I know you guys got a big one this weekend. Friday night game. Quick week this week. How's that been for you guys? Have y'all been prepping for a Friday night game this week?
You have to turn the days around, and it happens really quick. You have a road game. You got to get right back. You got to get right into your breakdown of the team that's coming up the next couple of days, and then it makes it even tougher when you're on the road. So you lose a day for traveling. So the kids have been really good. We've bounced back. We've taken a couple licks on the chin here. But the kids are still here, still fighting. Coach Mack is going to keep them moving. Friday, ESPNU will be there, and hopefully we can have a good showing, not have too many tomatoes thrown at us from the stands. That's the key.
I love it, man. Guys, make sure to catch Coach Fred and Alcorn State on ESPNU. National TV this week, a big matchup against Prairie View in the SWAC West out there, man. Still a competitive division, man. Everything's still kind of open up there, man. So we'll definitely
Right.
an interesting game moving forward. But guys, for Coach Fred, for myself, for the Blue Bloods, we are out for right now.